In this transformative webinar by the Colour Me Alive Collective, you will get a basic knowledge of how to work with shame and tools for responding to your shame in new, effective ways.
We're going to be talking about shame. Tonight I want to start with saying that it's not something that we're born with, because you very seldom, or actually you never see a child that feels shame. You see children and they'll, as soon as you see them, they'll take their clothes off, they'll, throw their bottle across the room, they'll say whatever's on their mind. They don't understand shame, because I don't think that it's something that they want to understand, because they want to be free. Now, I also know that we have to have an element of discipline and all that, but we're not talking about that tonight. So shame is something that's taught to us. So we learn it as we get programmed and by people and peers and teachers and parents and the whole lot.
Shame does help us in the sense that as relational beings, we need relationship and we need other people to respond to us. And when we feel shame, it's a signal that, oh, okay, something's happening here. I'm not getting the relationship that I want. I'm not getting connection or response. So you can kind of pivot and you can do something different, maybe express yourself in a different way, or, focus on the other person, and hopefully maintain that relationship and continue to build it. But obviously shame is incredibly uncomfortable as well, because as social beings, we need relationship and connection. So to feel that rejection or disconnect or being ignored is excruciating for us.
Fusion is all about acknowledging our pain, because we need to acknowledge our pain in order to move forward. But a great thing that we can do when shame appears, and I know Adriana spoke about this earlier, is to respond with kindness. So for me, it's all about acknowledging my pain, responding with kindness. So shame can be a great indicator that you need to extend kindness to yourself. So there's lots of different ways we can do this. It could be through just saying a kind word to ourselves. So everybody makes mistakes. Can be one you say to yourself when something goes wrong. And I know today with the links in the Zoom, I'll be saying that to myself later. Everyone does make mistakes and we are human. Instead of saying to yourself, something horrible, reminding yourself, like, I can do this. Or even extending words of compassion to yourself. I'm here for you. Think about what your friends or someone you really care about or get on well with has said to you when you were going through a hard time, and say that back to yourself. Sometimes words can be a difficult place to start for people, and I know it was difficult for me, but gestures can be a great way to show ourselves self-compassion. It's giving ourselves compassionate hand. So feeling in your body where the pain is. Say you have that horrible presentation tomorrow and you're feeling anxious, you're feeling pain, you're not feeling good. If you're getting a headache, say it can be just gently putting the hand where you're feeling the headache. Or I know for me, I always feel it in my stomach if I'm feeling anxious or nervous. So I'll just put my hand on my stomach or on the heart as well. That's a very beautiful place to put that gesture.
I found with the education, I was able to manage it a bit better. That I was able to say, well, look, I can't eat certain foods because they triggered it even more. So once I cut them out, I was kind of semi-managed. I'm not all the time, by the way.
Sorry. Go on.
I was just, you kind of understand what's behind it as well, because I think so often we see the behaviour, and like an 8-year-old child or however old doesn't know how to comfort themselves, probably doesn't even know what that need is if they've never had it met. So they're stuffing down the cupcakes and they feel great. So that behaviour continues, the stuffing down the cupcakes, and you never know what it is behind it. It's that child trying to comfort themselves and trying to regulate themselves, or even with the anger. Like the child probably just wants to be heard and no one's listening to them, so they explode, So whatever the need and the motivation is behind that feeling, I think that's where the healing is. And you can only get that by really sitting with the child. And I think with the food, obviously you're at that level of the behaviour and the comfort, so it's uncomfortable to go beyond that. Of course, to sit with the child that is feeling the feelings that make you eat the food, and that's kind of where the growth starts. But it can be tricky because it's not always pleasant.
No, and it's definitely not pleasant. But I think when you do understand it, and I think a lot of people who do overeat and who are struggling, as we know, like we live in
a society now where most people are, 67% of adults are overweight or obese. So it is a problem. So I'm wondering, do a lot of people do exactly the same thing for different reasons? Obviously not for the same reasons I did it, but you know, stress or anxiety or whatever it might be. And it's easier, like it's more, as I say, socially acceptable to eat something rather than to be sitting there, you know, slugging out of a can of Heineken, you know, or smoking a joint. So if people had more knowledge around, you know, what food does to us and, you know, how it kind of triggers that part of the brain that makes us feel connected. Isn't it crazy that, and like food is nurturing, so we're supposed to be nurtured by food, the same as we're supposed to be nurtured by people. So our first experience into the world is we're connected to somebody, and then when we go into we're born into the world, if that connection is broken, we need to find that connection somewhere. So that can be whatever can take me out of my head. While I was eating, I wasn't in my thinking mind. I was away in, I don't know where I was, but I was in a nice place. So I'm assuming that's the same for, you know, people who drink too much or take drugs. I know from my experience working in rehabilitation, they say exactly that. And they said that the worst of the trauma, the deeper the drug, the heavier the drug, you know, so as to take them right out of their head, you know. So if we all had like an understanding of that, so if that was a topic in school, that they taught us things like this, wouldn't that be a real revelation for kids in maybe first year or second year to really go on and go, like just maybe even starting to register it. I'm not saying they're going to understand it at that age, it's so young, but even to plant the seed.
Yeah, well, I just think it's so sad, you know, clients who are typically traumatized, you know, they become cut off from parts of themselves. So then, you say for example, you're abused as a child, physically abused as a child. You know, it's not always the case, but typically, you know, they're cut off from their emotions because they have to be desensitized. It was a way of living in the environment they lived in. But when we become cut off from our emotions, we end up in dangerous situations. So that client who has that trauma will probably end up in an abusive relationship later on. So it's, you know, the job of psychologists, therapists, coaches to get people in touch with that trauma, get them, you know, relating to it in a different way and getting back in touch with themselves, because, you know, when we're in touch with ourselves, we can make better decisions. We need to be able to protect ourselves, and that's about stepping into the emotions that arise from what has happened to us in earlier life.
But why is it that we keep ignoring the emotions, Sarah? Why is it we keep pushing them down? What is society tell us, don't show any emotion, get over it?
On a societal level, we're not good at feeling emotion, and we're conditioned to buy things and to think that, you know, fulfillment and everything is outside of ourselves. I think it happens, like, I think absolutely, it's kind of what Keelan is saying, but it just happens so much every day on a much subtler level. Like even what you were saying about being a kid and, sure, you're grand, sure, get on with it, you're grand. So you're taught that's how you respond to your feelings, you know, and there's no room for them. I was actually walking in the park the other day, and I passed what I assume was a dad and two sons, maybe about 7 years old, and one of them was crying, and the dad was, you know, trying to make him feel better, but he was like, oh, you're grand, it was an accident, sure, you're grand, and oh, you're just getting upset now, you're getting upset. He goes, no, I'm not getting upset, but of course you're going to reject the emotion when you're kind of like that subtle shaming for being emotional.
Well, anyone would be upset if they felt. That's a natural reaction. That's like showing off a complete.
But how ordinary is that? You know, that someone's upset. You're grand. Come on, you're fine. Oh, you're upset now.
That's the protection thing again. Because imagine that person breaks their arm and they're in pain. They'd be like, oh no, actually it's fine. And they might not go to the doctor then. And then it gets worse.